You are.
Welcome everyone to this hangout with Lila. We're here to talk about Lila's responses to the FDC Advisory Group recommendations that came earlier this year. For those of you who are listening to us and online, you will remember that the FDC process, the Funds Dissemination Committee, was set up in 2012 in order to disseminate annual plan grants to large established Wikimedia organizations. In doing so, the FDC has also been very instrumental in thinking about strategy and impact of these grants across the movement and looking at strategy across programs in the Wikimedia movement. What we also put into place at the time of setting up the FDC was a 2-year pilot process, a review process headed by the FDC Advisory Group, who were responsible not only for setting up the FDC framework, but also for responding to the FDC's impact over 2 years. So in May of this year, the FDC Advisory Committee met once again, worked with the FDC to learn of their responses, and then pulled together a set of recommendations to the ED of WMF around the FDC going forward. Lila then, as the new ED of WMF, responded to these recommendations over time, and in particular in a memo that we published last Friday. This is our opportunity to hear from Lila on how she feels about the FDC process, the next steps going forward, and grants in particular, as well as how she feels about where we should be putting our focus, what the trade-offs are around resources that go to our movement. Lila, over to you.
Thank you, Anastasia. I'm hoping that we have, looks like we have 9 viewers. Is there any reason why we're not seeing the faces?
They're watching on the stream, not in the Hangout itself.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Okay. Well, I am very happy to have you here. Unfortunately, I can't see you. And I wanted to first say that it was really important for me to actually have a dialogue with you, and a more synchronous dialogue. It's great to publish documents, but I think having a conversation more on a direct basis is really important for us as we move forward. So a couple of things that I wanted to bring up as I review what we've done so far and take your questions. As I came into the foundation, one of the most important things that I probably brought with me is the level of discipline around watching and measuring impact. And you are starting to see this come out in this report, but more importantly, the foundation is under a lot of pressure, actually, directly to redefine and reevaluate what we measure and how we hold ourselves accountable for our own impact. And that is my focus, actually, first and foremost. However, as part of what we do is create, fund, and inspire the programs that that are funded through our movement, as well as to support the programs that you create out there in different places around the world. But I think the same kind of level of scrutiny and impact analysis that we are going to demand of ourselves, similar, potentially somewhat less impact analysis needs to be applied to other programs that are established out there. And I think it's important for us to realize that not everything can be measured off the bat. I understand that there's a lot of caveats to this request. However, I think that should be our overarching goal, is to understand how the donor money that we bring in and that we spend impacts our project overall. So with that, I actually want to say that I really appreciate that the work that's done out there in different countries cannot be all done by WMF. And I think there is an important role for organizations that exist either focused on specific projects or focused on specific cultures and languages. And I personally believe that the most important things that today we think can be done by local organizations that are not thematically based have to do with building partnerships locally with museums, educational institutions. So we call it here GLAM, right? And another piece of that would be STEM institutions as well as to make strides in affecting policies. As the internet grows and as the free knowledge on the internet becomes even more and more important, I think the policies are becoming increasingly important, and they're obviously different in different countries. So with those two objectives in mind, I think it's really important that we're all on the same page, that we all have jobs to do. They're not the same jobs, but they're very complementary. So if we're successful, we can make the biggest impact when we work in concert with each other. So I want to also mention that I'm still very much in learning mode. I'm digging through data. I'm digging through our current reports. And we're also, I think I've mentioned this before, and you'll see more of this later this month, starting to think about how we approach our strategy and how we approach our planning and how we approach our internal operations as well here. So we'll talk about this more, and this is just an early precursor to more work that is to come. Finally, the last thing that I want to mention here is my personal belief that as we move forward, we need to figure out the best way to grow both the organizations, but also the program impact from the really small ideas and seeds. And I will tell you, on any given week, I get quite a few ideas pitched to me, and I think the biggest hindering obstacle, yeah, the biggest obstacle, thank you, to those isn't really actually finances, right? Because when you just have a seed, it's easy to throw money at it, but it's not the money that makes the difference. It's our ability to actually execute, to build a program, to try to run through it, and to see if it creates impact. And usually it doesn't take a lot of money. It takes competency, it takes thinking through, right? So how do we take that, figure out whether the program is successful and produces impact, and do it in wherever place in the world that we can. And then once it does, grow and scale it to a large program. And that's where we actually should be putting more financial resources behind it. So from that perspective, I think it's really important for us to really understand what the impact is and be very, very diligent about where we're investing our resources and where we're not investing them. That's a question just as important as the question of what to do is the question of what we're not going to do going forward. And those are the questions that we need to address together. So with that,
I think that's
anything
great.
else I think I forgot to mention?
No, I think that was great, Lila. What I'm going to suggest is, of our 21 viewers, if some of them could come on to the Hangout, that would be really helpful, and it would be nice for Lila to see you face to face, at least a few of you. So if about 10 of you can hop on to the Hangout, we can help you meet Lila more face to face. And if there are questions that you have for Lila as you're doing this hop, please send them to Katie. I see Katie has a whole bunch of interfaces open between GChat and IRC and anything else. Please send us your questions, and Lila will be happy to answer them.
And actually, at this time, we are going to need to pause to invite people because of the setup of the Hangout requires them to be manually invited. So to those of you listening, please ping me your email address, and we will add you to the Hangout right now. And I'm going to send you a few right away.
Okay.
Anna, you're going on now. Jan as well.
You're sending those to me?
So to introduce you to them, Lila, Anna is the ED of Wikimedia Argentina. She comes as someone who has worked with different civil society organizations, including the UN, but she's new to the Wikimedia movement, and she is currently working with Wikimedia Argentina, particularly on IbroConf, which is the major conference held within the IbroQuop, or the Latin American Spanish-speaking communities, in order to build shared strategy. So Anna is going to come on. Jan is the ED of Wikimedia Sweden and has been a long-term Wikimedian, so you will have both of them. And he moved from being chair of Wikimedia Sweden to being their first ED.
We also have Matanya Moses,
who is on the FDC, is a new member of the FDC in this current round, and he is a long-term steward, sysop, admin of the Hebrew Wikipedia, and steward, of course, being global.
Yep.
And we have Charles from Wikimedia Switzerland.
Charles is again a long-time Wikimedian who moved from being on the board of Wikimedia Switzerland to being their chief science officer, which is the title they have for the head of their organization.
And we have Christian.
Christian is also on the FDC, has been on the FDC for the last 2 years. Christian is on Wikimedia Italy's board. Wikimedia Italy has been one of those organizations that has not yet joined the FDC and has actually not taken direct grants from Wikimedia Foundation at all over the last few years, because they've had a very useful way of raising resources from within Italy itself through their tax policies, charitable tax policies. But Wikimedia Italy is thinking of coming into the FDC process from the next round.
Okay.
And Sandra Rentis from Wikimedia Netherlands.
She is ED of Wikimedia Netherlands, and again has been there for the last year and a half, I think. Is that right?
I think about 2 years now.
About 2 years now, and brings a lot of strategic thinking to the movement, but comes as an outsider to the Wikimedia.
Okay, so how full is the room right now?
One additional person.
Okay, one additional person goes to Michal from Wikimedia Israel, who is now the last person to be added.
Again, with Sandra, Michal brings a lot of knowledge and expertise within the larger civil society. She's been working in Israel for many, many years, and is now ED of Wikimedia Israel, and has been for the last year.
And is there one more space, Chip, or are we full?
No, I think we have another one.
Okay, one more space is going to, someone just chatted me, I think it was Nikki from Wikimedia Deutschland.
Nikki has just joined Wikimedia Deutschland recently as, I think, their grants and partnerships officer, and you will meet her later this week. She comes with a lot of background in organizational development, but again, is a new Wikimedia.
Okay, so let's carry on. If anyone else would like to be added, if we have people dropping off, then you'll be free to join, but let's carry on. And thank you so much for being willing to do this on the go, Chip and everyone.
So welcome, everyone. It's nice to see faces.
One face.
We can see one face. We can see Anna right now, hoping to see more very soon.
And if there are questions, please feel free to post them in the group chat or on IRC, and I will start taking them now while people are joining.
All right, so I'm on Skype and also on IRC and also on GChat and email. So if you have any questions, please feel free to
As many as possible.
as many as possible. I'll start getting them ready to go.
Anna or Jan, since we can't see you, do you have any questions? Okay, why don't I ask you a question, Lila?
Let's do that.
Because I know that this is a conversation that Garfield and I have been having with FDC organizations for some time now. And part of their struggle, I think, is not being certain about WMF's position to chapters. They feel uncertain about it. They feel as though we have in the past change our opinions very quickly and sometimes year to year, and that has left them feeling a little insecure and uncertain about how we think about chapters in general. You started off with a very strong value proposition for chapters when you gave your introduction and overview, and I wondered if you want to share a little more exactly how you see local organizations being impactful in their context, but impactful being the key word. For you, a lot of what you are trying to drive, both within WMF and in the movement, is clear focus, clear strategy, and therefore clear impact. So I think it would be good for organizations to hear a little bit more around how you think of our partnerships with organizations, and both reassure them that we see the value at the same time as we're pushing them to do better, as we all should be.
Thank you. Great question. So I want to decouple, before I start, I want to decouple actually the question of roles and the question of funding. So let's put funding aside right now, right?
Yeah.
Because funding actually, it doesn't really impact the goals and the alignment.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for WMF and for the chapters to be in alignment around our goals, right? And don't have conflicting interests. And one of the things that I'm seeing right now is there still, I think it's much less today than from what I understand years ago, is that there are actually some orthogonal interests, right? And that's very unhealthy for any kind of organization, right? What we need to make sure is that we're completely aligned on our goals and objectives, right? And I think ultimately our goals and objectives are very clear. More knowledge, more readers, more contributors, right? It's very more better knowledge, right? We can measure that quality, right? So let's look at our competencies in that context. WMF has very strong competency in certain areas, right? Digital fundraising, for example, great competency area. Legal programs, great competency area. Technology, I would like to see it improve in how we do it, but it's a great competency area for us as well. Hard to replicate at scale within a small organization. However, at the same time, where do we not have competency? Let's talk about that, and let's talk about that's a perfect place, in fact, for a local organization or a chapter. We don't have great competency areas and content within a particular culture or language or project, right? An area of expertise. So if we slice something, let's say we want to invest in female issues in Catalan community. We cannot do that effectively from North America. From sitting here in San Francisco, we just don't understand it. Another portion is fundraising at a local level, right? We cannot go, like you were describing Wikimedia Italy, we cannot go and fundraise from local organizations in person in all the different countries, right? However, there's a lot of funds that can be raised that way, and that's a great way for a local organization, great thing to do for a chapter. Another piece is, like we were talking about earlier, our relationships. The WMF can support it, but we would have to have an army of employees stationed in different corners of the world, understanding local cultures, speaking the language, to go and work with the museums and the galleries and the archives and the schools, right, universities, and all of these institutions. This is something that local organizations can do much better than us. Again, they need non-monetary support in this case, program support. They need our ability to support them from a legal perspective, from the program perspective, from a communications perspective, from the perspective of giving them kind of materials and blueprints for what to do. But actual ability to execute in a program like that is much better from somebody who is local in Argentina than from somebody who is local in North America, right? So those are just a few examples where there is clear alignment and synergy. All of those things are with the same principle, with the same goal in mind. How do we get better, free the content, put it in free format on the internet for everybody to use. How do we encourage and as a result encourage more people to participate, encourage more people to consume the knowledge as well, right? And it's all of those three work together.
That makes very good sense to me, and I'm hoping it will make sense to all of our friends who are joining us. Any questions at this point to Lila's response? People are still thinking things over, I guess.
Yes, there is a question coming in from Pine about whether the questions he's posted on the top page will be responded to.
Yes, we are going to respond to questions on the top page, and as soon as I'm actually working on that, she will be posting responses. They will be all either written or approved by me, and we'll be doing this over the upcoming week.
Okay, so I'm shortly to come to the wiki page near you.
Okay, another question from John Davies at Wikimedia UK. Hello, John. He says, years ago, Wikipedia was seen as very unreliable. A lot of the work of chapters has changed that perception by building prestigious relationships. How can we measure this? Do you have any thoughts?
So we're actually, I have a meeting scheduled, I think, coming up. We're trying to figure out how to best measure reliability and quality of information. What is hard, I think that's possible to do. It may not be a perfect measure, but there's definitely a start. Start with that thinking. I think what is difficult to measure is today is attribution, especially post-factum attribution, to how much the chapters have influenced that, right? I think going forward, if a chapter wants to work on something like that, we can work together to figure out or to think about how would we gauge the impact of those programs in that particular region, country, or topic area. And if you think about it, you know, it's not as hard of a number as number of visitors or something like that. But if you make an analogy to, let's say, PR strategies, right? One way you measure PR strategies is through understanding how many people are talking about you, right? How many conversations are happening about you, and what is the context of those conversations, right? So it's an indirect measure, but still helps you measure your reach, for example. Similarly here, we can apply something similar to that and measure how many organizations and conversations have been had, and what were the outcomes of those conversations, right? So that's literally off the top of my head. I think if we sit down and actually think through that, and that becomes one of our programs, then we can come up with much better measures as a result. But again, that said, I think we need to start small. We need to understand it first before we start seriously investing in something like that.
That's great. We have had a few people say they'd like to try to receive a link again, so we need to pause for about 15 seconds to try to add them and get them in the room. So Chip is going to mute us while we do that.
Probably, because you already added them, you can probably just post the link on IRC or...
It actually is due to the fact that people don't have Wikimedia addresses, they have to be manually added. Otherwise,
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
And if I start typing, it mutes the mic. Another great feature.
So I'll be muted as well at the moment.
Intermittently while I type.
All right. So let's.
I can.
We're all taking a little pause, a technical pause.
You know, you can also ask them to ask you to.
Yeah, that's what Chip was doing. Yeah.
That's
So in the meantime, if anyone has any questions, please line them up.
You guys are making it too easy for me. Where are your questions?
Okay. All right. I do see a question come in from Delphine, who is watching the streaming.
Okay.
She's a member of the FDC, and she says, we talk a lot about evaluation and impact, but are we sure to know what impact really means in order of our magnitude? Is impact brand recognition, for example? To what extent? For example, let's say X% of people know what Wikipedia is. What's the impact? That they do, but also they know that it's free, that they do, but also know that it's free as in beer, etc.
So I think we need to be clear about what this great question. I think we need to be clear about what impact we expect from local organizations and what impact from the WMF. On the WMF side, we're going through a rigorous set of exercises to actually rebuild or build a first scorecard first. Part of that is brand recognition, for example. I don't think it's necessarily fair to us to build brand recognition from a local organization or yet. I think we can start with something. We need to crawl before we run, in other words. And like with any program, I think we need to focus it first and then spread it out, right? So today we have a lot of programs that are actually very large monetarily, but it's not clear what impact they're producing. Typically, the way programs are run, both from a nonprofit perspective as well as for-profit organizations, is the program starts as a seed and with a very clear goal. So goal could be brand recognition, but I wouldn't recommend that for a small organization. It's just it's harder to implement, right? But something like creating content through the GLAM programs is fairly easy to gauge and measure and fairly straightforward to implement, right? It's a relationship with the GLAM institution, and it's a number of bits and bytes that ultimately get uploaded to sources or comments or Wikipedias, right? Another possibility I might imagine is focusing even more narrowly. And saying, okay, we want to focus on a group of people. It could be women, or it could be medical professionals in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, let's say, and figure out whether we have community members that are already part of that group and how to nourish them to increase the overall group size, right? So programs like that, smaller programs, focused programs, measurable programs is where I think we need to be working on what we need to be working on first. And then once we see a program really take off and produce results, so let's say a GLAM program in Argentina is very successful, we know that we can put online X number of files. And it takes us, let's say, 2 people full-time to do it, right? And we know that if we add another 2 people working on this full-time, we can double that number. Well, that's a no-brainer, right? It's really easy to justify a fund like that, right? If we can't do that, that's much more difficult. We can apply it to all kinds of goals, but I think alignment of goals is important. And I think the simplest way to align goals today for us is around content quantity and, to an extent, content quality.
So Delphine has a follow-up question she wanted me to read, which was, what does impact mean, and how can we research what it actually means?
So I think it means, to me, it's a fairly straightforward question. I think we have a mission, and impact means affecting that mission in a positive direction, right? I think we can slice and dice that statement, but we are trying to affect as many people, engage as many people in the world as possible around consumption and production of knowledge, right? In order to do that, there's different things that different programs that we can deploy. I think as we need to think about who those people are, where those people are located, things like that, whether they have access to technology. I mean, all of those are questions that feed it. But at the end of the day, it's all about how many people are engaged and how many people are getting value out of what we do, right? So that's ultimately the impact that we want to measure. Everything else are kind of the sub-goals.
Great. Now we have a question from Nikki from Wikimedia Deutschland. She writes, in your response, you mentioned non-monetary support several times. I'm curious if there are further thoughts on this, what this will look like, and who will provide it.
So we already have started doing quite a bit of that, especially this is more pronounced on, I believe, other grants, not FDC grants. And correct me, Anna, if that's right.
A little bit of all of them, but yeah. Specifically
So it's today it takes a form of consultative conversations, right, about what tactics to use to best execute on programs. And in some cases we know better, in some cases we don't know as well. So we're both learning on both sides. What I would like to see going forward are us formalizing more sort of templates for things that are working, so that they can be taken like a blueprint and then tweaked for different countries and different languages and different applications. So that's one piece. But to tell you the truth, it's like any organization. You have your board that's supposed to give you kind of not instructions, but supposed to give you ideas and help you brainstorm. Foundation can do a lot of that as well, just because we have a lot of expertise here in-house to support building programs like that. We're also looking actually to our advisory community to step in and help with that as well. So more information is going to be coming, but those are the early thoughts that we have.
Can I add to that? I think what we've been doing, as many of you know, is on the FDC side. Gottfield and I, for instance, have been doing very intensive visits with all of you to understand your context, where you think you're going, how you need support, and what your strategy can be, both within your local context as well as in partnership with us at the WMF. At the same time, this is not a process that can be scaled effectively, short of cloning Gottfield and me in multiple ways. So as Lila said, what we're looking at is across our many grants programs and the different kinds of constituent elements of our movement to have very clear processes of templates or program guidance, toolkits that allow people to understand what has been done before, what best practices are, and how they therefore can do it in their local context. One of the things we've been doing around that, for instance, is learning patterns library, which are very sort of pithy, concise ways in which people can say, okay, if we want to run a really effective editathon, what are the 3 things we must remember to do? And what are examples of those across the movement so that we learn from each other? In addition, we want to make sure that we are focusing on a level of coordination, particularly around content, as you were saying, Lila, because I think in talking to these organizations, we know that their key value add is local content, in the sense of bringing content online and improving it, as well as supporting their local volunteer communities to do that. But how do we make sure that that content is also focusing on the content gaps in our language communities?
Yeah, with that we can actually help with data as well.
Exactly.
Because we know.
Exactly. That's right. So I think there's an element of supporting and facilitating experimentation. There's an element of supporting with because I think we know that their key value add is local content, in the sense of bringing content online and improving it as well. Who speaks?
No, we're still feedback.
Oh, that's
Carry on.
I didn't even recognize my own voice.
That was you speaking.
I know. So as I was saying, I think we are looking at experimenting and facilitating the experimentation, as you were saying, of new ideas and innovation. We're looking at supporting with funds where it's needed, and mentorship. Like you said, one of the most important things we have done with, say, IEG is knowing that our individual volunteers have great ideas, not enough project management. How do we work with them for that? And then how do we also provide the self-assessment tools and the impact analysis that can help people do better?
Yeah, no, I think it really depends on the programs. The challenge that we have, I think, right now is that we don't have a clear kind of clearly segmented programs, right? So, for example, Wikimedia Deutschland has a fantastic program around actually building software, right? That I believe actually needs to be supported better by us, right? From the perspective of how do we integrate, how do we project manage. Right now it's kind of a side project for people when they have time. That's not acceptable, right? That's not a monetary support. It's a brain power support, right? That we need to provide in order to actually produce more impact. Programs like that can exist around the world, right? And they can start from, 1, 2 people, right? Just like this program, right? But if they require somebody from the WMF to plug in and help support and guide them, and not as a side project, but as their core focus and responsibility. As we move forward, hopefully we'll have much more. We'll have an understanding of these segments. So software could be potentially one of them. And then we will need to understand what does it actually mean to support those segments. Obviously, support for a GLAM program is going to be quite different than support for software design program.
And I think,
or a policy program.
And I think the thing to remember with this is WMF can't do everything and should not.
No.
And so we need to also prioritize how we facilitate and what we facilitate.
That's right. And we're going to have to make some decisions there going forward. But that's outside of the scope of this conversation.
With more to come.
Okay, another question from Michal from Wikimedia Israel. She writes, can you talk about the dissonance between Wikimedia being a volunteer-based organization and the movement's need to professionalize? My experience is that it's sometimes creating tension between the local volunteers and the chapter.
That's a good question. I think it's important to parse out what professionalize actually means in different contexts, right? I think one place where we're not going to play in is directly, right, as a employee-based center, right, is creating content directly, like writing articles. That is clearly not a charter of an organization, right? Enabling others to do that's what we're all about, all right? So I think when we talk about professionalization, it's not about building large orgs. It's not about running like a bureaucracy, right? It's really about when we do form a professional organization, making it as professional and as well run as possible, right? And I would actually argue to say the best in class in the non-profit world, right? Which means entirely driven by goals and objectives and producing results for the donor's money, right? So I think there's two aspects here. Just going back to the original question, professionalization does not mean growing orgs. Professionalization means for orgs that are to be established or exist today, they need to be the best in class.
Can I add one thing to that very, I think, pithy summary of it? I will say that I think one of the mythos in our movement right now is this whole notion of professionalization. And exactly as you said, it's got associated problematically, I think, with organizational growth and development. And I think if we take that away from it and say, at the end of the day, what do we say when we talk about being professional? Volunteers can and are professional. At the end of the day, professionalization in the practice of it is being effective.
That's right.
How can we be effective, whether we're being effective as individual volunteers, whether we're being effective as groups or as organizations? I think that's where we'd like to move the conversation. I think we all recognize it can be tough to do it, but I'd rather that all of us, whether WMF or amongst Wikimedia organizations, shift the language around effectiveness.
Yeah, I think the language is really important to how we speak, because there's so much history that's associated with particular words, and to somebody new like me, that's mind-boggling, frankly. So now I am sensitive to the language that people use. So in many cases, I just want to reset it and use a different term so that people can associate new meaning with it. So professionalism in the normal world means knowing what you do really, really well, right? But to us, apparently, it means something else.
And we know that our volunteers want to do really well. Every one of our volunteers comes to this because they're deeply motivated by their passion for free knowledge and their recognition of how important it is.
Yeah, and oftentimes they are, right? They're subject matter experts, or they're language experts, they're grammar experts, they're, we have all kinds of professionals out there in our community. Sometimes they start changing what they do, and that's where I think we may be talking about this kind of subject, right? So if a volunteer who is professionally, I don't know, a director at a museum wants to start running a WMF style organization and do something different, so they'll have to adjust, right? They have to adopt a different skill set. And that, you could apply the word professionalization to that, right? I think it's really important that people who are actually running organizations are professionals at running orgs and getting impact. Just like it's important that people who are volunteers are professional at what they're doing every day, in some way.
Okay, we have a few more questions, so feel free to keep sending them in. Christian, who is a member of the FDC, asks, can I ask if changes are planned to the funding cap of the FDC, currently set at $6 million per year, or if there will be a cap at all to the FDC funds in the future?
So we are, in general, rethinking our grant-making strategy overall. And currently, we're not making any changes to caps, or we're not touching it, basically. We're just letting it run the way it does as we're rethinking how the grant-making strategy is going to exist in the future. At that point, we can talk about that.
And I will say, I think one of the key concerns for the FDC has been that they felt that this current cap of the $6 million came on with minimal consultation with them. And as we've said in your memo, any changes we want to make will be very much discussed with the community and the FDC before we operationalize. And we're thinking of any operationalization of those changes being in 2 years' time. So
as I tell everybody, I'm not going to take necessarily all of the advice, but I'm definitely going to listen to all of it. And I'll give you my early preview and my early thoughts on our grant making as a whole, our brand making strategy. I really want to think about it as an integrated approach. Right now we have these buckets of money and ceilings on them. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think what really we need to be doing is following where impact is. If the program is impactful and we measure against other programs, right? We prioritize the most impactful program, and the money follows that. Right? It's not some arbitrary kind of, okay, here is X, and we can go above that. I think it really needs to be based on impact.
Okay. I have another question from Charles from Wikimedia Switzerland, and he asks, is the implementation of the 2-year funding pilot for this round or for the next round in 2015? His question is whether we will be moving forward with the multi-year grant pilot that was solicited this year.
Yeah, that's immediate. Yeah, that's immediate.
We're moving with it, and as far as I know, 3 organizations have applied to be considered for it by the FDC, and the FDC will be looking at those 3 organizations and their proposals in this coming round.
And keep in mind, the funding isn't guaranteed, right? You still have to resubmit for the second year to make sure that you're making progress on what you said you're going to make, right? So there's still due diligence involved along the way.
And what we expect at the second-year mark is a clear sense of the progress against the first-year goals.
Okay, there are several more questions. One is from Nikki. She says, from Wikimedia Deutschland, she says, in your paper you emphasize both program effectiveness and organizational effectiveness. What are your thoughts on the relationship between the two, especially given your concerns about overhead and organizational growth?
Yeah, great question. I think the organizational effectiveness is a derivative of the program effectiveness. And in other words, if your program is effective, your organization must be effective to a degree to support that. But program effectiveness is first and foremost, right? I can tell you, I've seen a lot of small organizations here in the Valley, and effective and not effective. But in the end, if your programs are effective, right? If you're getting a bunch of users, if you're driving impact, everything else will follow it, right? You will adjust your organization accordingly. So I think that's by far is much more is the big thing, right? Otherwise, we don't, like, if we don't have program effectiveness, we have nothing, right? Organizational effectiveness past that is important because once you scale the program to a certain size, right, you're probably spending at that point, you have a lot of capital that's going into you have money basically that's going into your organization. And as a result, the organization needs to be effective enough to make sure that the basics of running the organization are met. Right. So again, the organizational impact, organizational effectiveness follows the program effectiveness.
All right, from Ana in Wikimedia Argentina, she writes, as the representative of Argentina that belongs to the known global south, is there any specific objective to develop that WMF deemed necessary in the global south? That is, any specific objective expected from the global south?
So we have not zeroed in enough on that yet. However, we are looking at engaging with or focusing on what we call emerging regions, on global south in general, as one of the strategic objectives for the WMF. And as a result, we'll be thinking more through what does it actually mean. So I'll give you an example. Understanding right now, learning about what are the areas of content that are critical, what are the languages that are growing the fastest, and both from a perspective of technology being available in the region, as well as what we're actually seeing, and what kind of sources are available in those languages, because English is very different, and the global north is very different in availability of resources versus global south. So those are a few things that we're thinking about. We don't have an answer for that yet, and this is somewhere where actually collaboration would be extremely helpful, right? You can tell us what's available, and part of the conversation needs to be, okay, we're going to take a small program and we're going to go and learn what are the resources, what are the topic areas, and what are the languages, for example.
I'd add that I think we're also quite clear that we recognize that the Global South is not a monolithic space,
absolutely.
And that there's a great heterogeneity in those communities, and that those communities are at different moments in their life cycle.
Right.
So for us to understand the life cycle, to understand what motivates people in those different contexts, we need to understand volunteer motivation much better. And I think we understand that volunteer motivation in emerging communities might be different from the way that volunteer motivation has developed in the first 10 years of the Wikimedia projects. And one of the things we're doing very specifically to address this, as you know, Anna, is the Global South User Survey. From that user survey, we hope we will gain a lot more data that can help us understand these contexts and work with them. But we also have to continue, like you said, to work with our partners in the Global South to know what needs to be done better.
Well, the reality is, if you're in the country, you're much closer to the community. And one thing that we really need to be thinking about is understanding where the community is going. So where are they engaged, on what kind of content, what are they editing, what are they building, what new articles are they creating, and then supporting them there. Right, so what we need to do is we need to have a distributed program of giving our community members support and tools to do more, better work in the context of the local environment, as opposed to us trying to build one tool that fits them all. It's not going to. That's not going to happen.
Well, we had a follow-up question that's already been answered, so that was from Atanya, just about learning and researching more in the Global South.
Yeah,
so.
And I think we need to have small programs, small pilot programs. Like when I talk about impact, there are going to be programs that the whole impact of them is to come back with the information, right? They're not going to be huge funds, right? But they're extremely important for us, because when we establish that, then the next step is to take that information, apply it, and actually take some amount of resources and actually try implementing and try going after that.
Okay, then we had Michal, who had asked the question earlier about the dissonance between the chapter and the community members. She said, in your response, you did not address our role in building community and community health. Can you address that issue?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about, right? So you have a much closer relationship with your language community. I think it's really important for us to understand what is happening within those contexts. We cannot do it within the WMF today, and I actually don't think we should invest too heavily in that. I think that's a great place for the chapters to step in and help. However, we need to have very good coordination around that. So an example, let's say in your community, you notice that people are editing on history of Israel, right? And you see a small emergence of the community. Applying support for that community and that context, right, might be the right way to go. Even with your GLAM program, maybe that's where you start, right? And I'm shooting completely out of the blue here, right? And this is just to illustrate my point, right? Understanding who your community is, what are they working on, and then feeding them and supporting them better so that those areas are growing. Alternatively, you can look at it from a different perspective, right? What are the known gaping areas within your community that are not happening today, right? And how can we seed that? How can we encourage people to participate in those areas? But again, it is within your language, within your culture.
So can I give you a little more context to Michal's question, because I understand that context a little, and I know the challenges she and others face in that context, and it's I think true for chapters overall. One of the struggles they have as we ask them and challenge them to think about impact a whole lot more is this balance between proactive strategy, where they know that they have significant leverage opportunity with partnerships, for instance, with GLAM institutions, and the responsive strategy they need to have to work with their communities. So volunteers often are motivated not only by what the chapter is leading, but also by their own little ideas and so on. And chapters at this moment, I think, are struggling between that balance. And they're struggling with turning around to their communities and saying, look, as you do your thing and you are motivated and having fun, we are also responsible for these resources. We are stewards of these resources. But volunteers then feel like they're being undermined, or they're not being supported enough by Wikimedia organizations who are trying to keep one eye towards us and the FDC and all of our donors who are seeking accountability, and one eye on their volunteers who they're trying to support. So this is, I think, the conundrum that Michal and others are facing.
So I think it also depends on what specifically we're being asked to do, right? What exactly volunteers want, right? Because I think it's great where we have a lot of different idea generation, but frankly, they need to be baked a little bit before we start putting something in there. And I think if you can do one thing well at start, pick that thing and do it well. As long as it has a very clear, you're very clear about what you're trying to do. If your goal is to follow your community where they are already engaging and build a program to expand that, and your measure of success is increasing the number of contributors to that subject area, fine, just go do it. If your goal is to be more strategic and to go after, let's say, diversity and women participating, you will have to ignore some of the requests from the community, of course, but you have to be clear. This is our charter. This is our mission. This is what we're going to do for the next, X number of years, something like that. I think we can't do it all, right? We can't be everything to everybody. Not the WMF, not the organizations around the world. That's just reality of life, right? We can't be everything to everybody, and sometimes we have to say no. I think we need to decide where do we say yes and where we're capable of delivering great experience when we do say yes, and the rest, it's okay. We just say, look, we're sorry, we can't do it all.
And I think the clear thing that we understand how difficult and complex this work is. But like you said before, I think with all that our organizations share with us, if they share rationale and reasoning very specifically around not just where their funds are going, but where their time and effort is going.
Yeah.
I think that is something that not just the FTC, but all of us who are trying to understand that context will understand. So for instance, in Michal's case or in anyone else's case, if there's a very clear rationale and reasoning around what Wikimedia Israel is doing in order to support volunteer motivation and why it's important, I think we would all understand and appreciate that.
Yeah, I think we just need to have real clarity, you know, within the WMFF and talk about the pie, right? You have only, let's say you have 10 people, right? How are you going to split those people between all the different things you want to do? That's really important, right? That ultimately defines who you are as an organization and what are you going to do. And if you split those 10 people among 100 projects, you will not get any of those projects done. And if you're not clear about, and if let's say you took 5 of those people and put in project A and 5 on project B, but then you didn't tell anybody about what's going on, then you can get bombarded with, I mean, I see it, we're getting bombarded because we're not clear enough. It's part of the communication issues, right? But so we need to be really clear with ourselves where are we putting our time and energy, and make it clear to everybody else, right? Because inevitably, there is no chance that we're not going to be saying no to somebody. Right? We're going to have to make trade-offs and we're going to have to make hard choices. But without being clear about them ourselves and communicating them, that's where we really get, I think, in hot water. At least that's, I think, where WMF gets into hot water.
Yes, and believe me, Lila is certainly asking all of us across the organization exactly this question.
Okay.
So I think we need to wrap up.
We need to wrap up. We have 2 more questions, which I will read to you. And
why don't you read both together?
I will. I will do exactly that. And just to share with you that we have had 24 people on the stream plus those in the room. So thank you all so much for joining. We have 2 minutes to finish up, and so we can't take any more questions now, but please do feel free to share your thoughts and questions on the top page of the document, which we'll share another link to. The questions are one from Atanyan coming from Israel, who's a member of the FDC. He says, what does Lila think about the fact most users don't need or care about their local chapters? Should we do something about this? And Nikki, again from Wikimedia Deutschland, asking this. Do you see a role of chapters in building each other's capacity around resource development and collective impact? Any thoughts on how that would be facilitated?
So the first question, I think the users will care if they see impact, right? It's not the other way around. They're not going to care just because a chapter emerged. And I think if we focus on impact first, then the caring aspect will come naturally. And even if it doesn't come naturally, right, if we're starting to see impact, let's say people don't actually care about the chapter, but they are more engaged, who cares? It's fine. So I think what we need to be focused on is creating the right kind of programs and support structures to in support of the outcomes that we want to see. And the second question was?
The second question was about the role of chapters in building capacity around resource development and collective impact.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think she's saying, is there any role for the chapters to support each other in helping to raise funds or having conversations around impact?
Collective fundraising.
I am sure there is, but I think right now, again, crawl before we run, right? Let's make the programs that we want to make work, and then let's share the lessons and the outcomes, and then let's see how we can help each other. So opportunistically, yes. As a program, I don't think we're ready to embark on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So I wanted to thank all of you. Thank you so much for joining and for your really thoughtful questions. I'm hoping, well, some of you I'll see next week, I think, right?
Yes, the FDC
right.
We will see next week.
So I'm really looking forward to doing that and answering the questions on the top page as well.
Thank you.
See you on the top page. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.